A warm welcome to you, the player, or GM, to this very first How to Be a Great Player. Now, I decided to run this series of videos because oftentimes players are not taught how to be good players. And I'm not talking about how to act properly or how to really get into character so that you only speak like your character throughout the entire session, even when you're having coffee afterwards and you go home and you say, "Wife, I am hungry." I'm not talking about that sort of thing. What I'm talking about is how to play the game. Because oftentimes the emphasis is on how to play your character, how to make your character decisions true to character. And that is important, and I will tell you later exactly how important it is. What I'm talking about is the game of role-playing. A lot of people don't look at it as a collaborative storytelling game. That's all that it is. The dice, the numbers, all of that, and they say it at every single opening of a rule book, is entirely up to you. And our options, not hard and fast rules. I want to go through not the first step in how to be a good player, but in a step on how to be a good player. For my GMs out there, head over to How to Be a Great Game Master, and you'll find the mirror lesson, which is how to use difficulty in your game. So as a player, difficulty versus story is the question. You're playing a wonderful character who you created and crafted with a wonderful backstory, and the game master keeps on giving you challenges and things that you just can't seem to overcome. Why does he make those difficulty numbers, those target numbers, those penalties so high? And why is it that every monster you encounter brings you to the brink of death? It just doesn't seem fair. Well, as much as the game master is responsible for telling a good story, for applying rules, and for creating a world in which you and your character will play in, you are responsible for making sure that the story makes sense. You're also responsible for only the story, and a lot of players forget that. So here is an insider's view from a game master to a player on what I would like players to do when faced with difficulty. If we start, you don't get to set the difficulty numbers. The game master does. And he has a whole range of reasons for why he's chosen this value or that value or the next value. How do you influence those difficulty numbers, though? How do you change it? The answer, quite simply, is through story. Now, you have to remain true to your character. So if your character is an introvert who doesn't talk to anybody, you're going to have a pretty tough time gaining information about the villains that you're going to go and hunt down. However, you have a recourse. Usually, you don't play on your own. You have a whole bunch of other players with you, and that introvert should be able to open up to at least one of them and say, "I think we should ask somebody something about something." In other words, the very first step you can take in changing those difficulty numbers is to prepare. And how do you prepare? Well, you have a game master whose entire purpose, his whole raison d'etre, is to simply provide you with answers. You have to ask the questions, though. So in preparing to change difficulty numbers, there are a few things you can do. Talk to the locals. The game master is just waiting to use his heavy Irish accent for his little old lady, who's going to provide you with the most remarkable insight into the fact that the creature that lives up on the mountain has eaten thousands of people at once. He's just waiting to do that. However, you have to ask the question first. It would be pretty weird if someone walked up and said, "Oh, excuse me, I see that you lot have got pretty much armor on and you've got a big horse and you look like the adventuring type. Oh, by the way, don't go up into the mountain because there's a dragon there that kills everybody." He cannot do that. It is not good storytelling. So, ask around. And don't just ask one person. The innkeeper in the inn only knows this much and he doesn't really care. Ask around, ask different people. Ask nicely. Always ask in character, but ask nicely. The second thing that you can do is look around. A lot of players assume that the game master will be saying, make a spot check, make a perception roll, make an awareness value check, whatever it might be, so that he can feed you clues. It doesn't work that way. He is feeding you what you are asking for. And of course, you can't just wander around saying, I'm looking for clues. Do I see any clues? How is that a good story? Does Sherlock Holmes walk into a room and go, I'm looking for clues? No. He walks into a room and he applies what he suspects is going on. Or at the very least, he starts to follow a logical process. But my dwarf does not follow logic. He's a character of emotion. Sure, like the weather outside currently is this violent, tempestuous thing. However, the dwarf might put himself in the shoes of the dragon. He's not an intelligent creature. His intelligence score is very low, but his wisdom is fairly high. So he can put himself into the position of the creature and go, well, if I was the creature, would I go here? Let me go wandering around outside the village. Let me go and scan this part of the moon. Whatever the case might be. That allows the game master to go, aha! What a wonderful player! Here's some information. Take some more information. Here's a magical item just because you asked a question. You went out and you did something. This is awesome. Here's a reward. I might be biased. Finally, and this is something that very seldom happens, and I've hinted at it already, you have other players with you. So seldom do I have it that players, and this is across the spectrum and in different countries, players do not share information with each other. And I'm not talking metagame. If you know something and your fellow player is being told a different thing that's happening in a different room, your character doesn't know that. And you should not bring that information to your character. There is nothing stopping you from having your character go to that character later and say, excuse me, I know we're on the trail of the dragon, but I think this, and that. What do you think? What clues have you uncovered? So seldom do I have parties that get together and say, all right, lads, we know X, Y, and Z. How does it fit together? Usually what happens is the more dominant leader in the group says, I have figured out A, Z, and Q, which means Y. We go there. And everyone else kind of follows along. Whether it's because it's in character or not, you need to step back and say, hang on a moment, we're playing a game. Yes, my dwarf is an introvert, but introverts think. And even though his intelligence is only 10, that's an average. Average people think all the time. Okay, maybe not when they're on traffic, but other times they do. Don't be afraid to engage your fellow players and say, oi, what have we got? What do we know? It allows you to pool your resources together. All of that comes together to lower the difficulty numbers. The game master is going to be absolutely ecstatic. He's actually going to be curled up in the corner, mumbling to himself, because he's got some kind of feedback. Instead of him just pouring out everything, you're now pulling it out of him, and he can give you more. So that's something to think about. Another thing when it comes to difficulty numbers, you shouldn't be thinking about them in terms of difficulty numbers. Please do not be sitting there going, well, the GM said I get +5, but I know that the rule book says that I should only get a +3 because I've got boots of +2. Your character does not know what boots of +2 is. Your captain on his starship does not know the modifier value of the Klingon bird of prey. The Imperial Death Star commander, okay, I made that up, the Grand Moff, who is in charge of the Death Star, does not know that Alderaan has a dodge value of -5. So if the GM says to you, well, this is going to be really difficult, and I'm giving you a -8 penalty, do not jump up and down saying, but it should only be -6. What you should be doing is saying, whoa, okay, hang on, turn to my fellow players. Can we form a human chain? Would that help us climb down this cliff, oh GM? Can I use the roots that are hanging out of the cliff to do so? Can I use my backpack as a strap? I hook it around my sword, which I bury into the sand, and then I use that to lower myself down. Would that help? In other words, instead of challenging the value, change the story. And do you see what I'm talking about? Always bring it back to story. If you bring it back to story, it means the game master is supposedly telling you a great story, and you are telling one back. That makes you a great player automatically. Because the rest of the players will be going, oh my gosh, look at how successful this person is. And he hasn't rolled anything. His values just don't matter because he's thinking. We're all intelligent people. You have to be to play this game. So don't be afraid to use your intelligence to cleverly think how that dumb creature might logically solve it, or might use intuition to solve it, or might use some kind of savvy to solve it. There's nothing wrong with being an intelligent player of a dumb character. Apparently the gods disagree with me. I hope my audio is okay, even though there's lightning and thunder all around. So please do not challenge the numbers. Change your story. Adapt, adjust. There's no rule that says once the GM has said it's -10 that you have to then take the roll. You can say, can I step back? Unless you've got a real nasty GM, he should say, go for it, because I can see you're about to change the story. And then finally, and I know it sounds like I'm ranting, but it's something that I'm very passionate about. If all seems lost, if the world seems as if the GM just wants you to be taken prisoner, the starship is dead, the Death Star is looming, the dragon is walking forward, and everything is gone, do not throw your hands up in the air and walk away saying, this is a waste of time, I cannot change this, this is a bad railroading GM. He might not be railroading. He might simply be trying to change the story. Or you might have walked into a situation that you're simply not high enough level to defeat. It happens. It's called real life. But in role-playing, it happens. And so many times have I seen it, where I've thrown a twist in, or the characters have wandered into a situation that's way beyond them, which I want to set up for a future story where the players get dejected. You have a whole bunch of story recourses that you can turn to test, to see whether this is something that the game master wants to have happen from a narrative perspective versus the game master just being an asshole. And there are assholes out there. The first thing you can do, and this is a tricky one, run away. I know it's a foreign concept, but you can just turn and run away. There's no shame in retreat, unless you're in a Japanese campaign, in which case you are screwed. But there is no shame in turning and running. And if he's a good GM, and a classic example is Steven Spielberg and George Lucas in Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. What does Indiana do when he's faced with 10,000 dart-blowing pygmies in the jungle? Does he turn and fight? Does he raise his hands and complain and say, George, you've written a terrible script, I can't defeat these things? No. He turns and runs, and it's one of the greatest moments in cinematic history. He runs and he's screaming, and there's that drama with the plane, and he jumps into the plane and the GM gives him a giant snake. It's fantastic. And all because he decided to run rather than fight. Later on, he chooses to fight a truckload of Nazis, and he succeeds. But that's the GM rewarding the player for making a good story choice. So run away. That's one thing. Ask for help. Help, help, help. You're on a starship. Open up the comms channel. Help, help. I need help. The GM, if he wants to give you help, will provide it. If he doesn't want to give you help, then go with the next step. Seek advice. If there is no one to be advice sought from, hard sentence, if there is no one there that you can seek advice from, then you're in a pretty tight situation. You have one last recourse. Surrender. There is nothing wrong with surrendering. Maybe the game master has decided that he wants you to learn that the tribe of people that you were attacking are actually the good guys. But the only way to do that is to have them take you prisoner. Look at what happened to Luke and Leia. They got taken prisoner by a bunch of cannibal Ewoks who then wanted to eat them. But then they managed to work out the situation. So please, as a good player, numbers are unimportant. Your game master is making them up all the time. Your numbers are there to create tension, and the tension is controlled by the game master. Your responsibility, and it is your sole responsibility, in my opinion, is to help tell a good story. The GM is doing his damnedest to entertain you. He really is trying to tell you a great story. He can't do that if you refuse to help tell it with him. I am sorry that this was such a preach, but I genuinely believe that anybody can be a great player, can be that kind of player where you say, if you are not in the next session, I don't want to play. You make it fun. A table of people who make it fun. Oh my gosh, mind blown. What an experience. I encourage you to watch Bacon. You're on the channel already. Watch the episodes. My players are a lot of fun. They really do cooperate. I hope they watch this video. There are a few pointers they might pick up there. But at the same time, encourage your GMs to watch this video if you agree with it. And if you do agree with it, hit that like button. If you really want me to do more of these things, hit the subscribe button and share it with your friends. If we've got great stories being told from the GM side and from the player side, we've got an experience that is absolutely mind-blowing. Until next time, happy playing.